Welcome to Cloud Insiders, the podcast that brings cloud down to earth. As always, head over to cloudinsiders.fm for show notes and other giveaways. Now let's get into it. Thanks for joining me today. I have with me Grant Friend, who's a Senior Systems Engineer over at Nutanix. And I have Darren McDonagh, who's a Senior Consultant with Xtravirt. Thanks for joining me, guys.
Hi, Oliver.
Right, let's get straight into it. For those who don't know, what is the team at Nutanix doing and what's making you grow so fast?
We've come from traditional technologies that have been around for some time, where data centers have evolved in their own way from standalone servers to centralized storage to virtualization, which is now very mature. I think we're all very familiar with it in the industry as a whole. And then we've come along and looked at this infrastructure, this three-tier traditional infrastructure, and looked at it and decided that that's not quite fit for virtualization because you've got the latency across the network between the local servers to the actual storage. You're not getting the benefits potentially of RAID arrays, for instance. And we've got an infrastructure that was initially built for physical servers and now isn't built for virtual servers or virtual instances. So the guys who founded Nutanix came out from the Google file systems, the Facebook web scale infrastructures, where they've got servers that are able to fail fast and provide an infrastructure, a resilient and high-performing infrastructure for the VMs that they run on it, but isn't built on an existing three-tier architecture, where, as I say, we've got problems with potentially spinning disks, the latency across the network, and other management components around it. So these guys have come along, looked at it and said there's an easier and a better way of doing that. And that's really what Hyperconvergence is.
So how would you define that for us?
So yeah, if you take what actually Hyperconvergence is, that's where we've taken at least two technologies and brought them closer to each other, natively together. In this case, we've taken converged compute and storage and brought them together in a single node.
And that's a really good point, because that kind of gives you the building blocks of Hyperconvergence. No longer do you have to go and buy separate components, install them separately, scale them separately. You get these building blocks of compute and storage in one go. So as you deploy linearly. You deploy a block of a hyperconverged infrastructure, whatever that may be, and you've got storage and compute without having to design separate components and provide that separate infrastructure.
Absolutely. And the benefits of that, you could look at that and go, well, there's nothing wrong with what we do now. But surely there is. I speak to customers, and I know Darren and I have worked at places where the CTO, the IT administrators have purchased terabytes of storage, more server and compute than they actually need because they're going to grow into it. And then you've sat there and watched the infrastructure grow, maybe outgrow what they've purchased, or maybe not even grow into what they've purchased. And then the licensing or the expiration have expired on the actual servers and the hardware. And then they need to replace the hardware when they haven't actually used the main bulk of the resource that's available to them. So exactly as Darren says, at Nutanix and other hyperconverged vendors, we provide infrastructures, IT enterprises with building blocks that for what they need now, and giving them an easy scale-out solution that doesn't require forklift upgrades of their storage and doesn't require them to buy big rack-mounted chassis that aren't necessarily fully populated.
And I hear what you're saying. So is that really the idea of web-scale IT that can scale as you do?
Absolutely, yeah. And is easier to manage. Because similarly, when you look at these traditional three-tier architectures, you've generally got three tiers of administrators running them as well, each of them siloing their way, ensuring that there's some magic and mystery behind exactly what they do. Again, many years ago when virtualization started out, the virtualization administrator really ring-fenced what they were doing because there was something secret or special about what they do. And storage administrators do that very much nowadays. Network administrators do as well. When web scale architecture breaks down those silos and makes it much easier to spin up storage, create VMs, and provide really the compute, the resource, the power for the DevOps administrators, the applications that are running on it. So it's giving more back. It's making it, it's not only is that scale out ability simpler, it's also the management side of it being much simpler.
They're really good points, and it kind of does give you back that control, really. So for large enterprises, they're typically, multiple data centers, multiple solutions, maybe different vendors for different products or different parts of the business, and kind of this sort of scale, this ability, and talk of the cloud and being able to sort of burst into the cloud, and you need rapid demand, and you've got these elastic resources that the cloud provides you. The hyperconvergence that gives you back some of that control. It allows you to deliver that new capacity, that new resource quite dynamically, quite quickly, and scale up an enterprise solution really quickly. So it actually does sort of set some of the focus back into the data center, gives back some of the control. And for those people where cloud isn't an option, hyperconvergence is a really elegant, neat solution for you to be able to grow rapidly, respond quickly, and it gives the business back, some real agility and control without having to go to a cloud provider, perhaps where maybe compliance or governance doesn't allow that.
Yeah, and just to carry on, I suppose, from that cloud point as well, myself, my colleagues, and I'm sure our competitors are speaking to enterprises where the CTO is deciding that cloud is the strategy. That's the direction we've got to go because, it's a good place to put our infrastructure. When really all the cloud infrastructure is somebody else's data center. You don't really have a management around it. They're just providing you resource and compute and the ability to spin up your VMs on it. But you're not able particularly well to manage it. And similarly, you're not able to cost it effectively. You get one price from the cloud providers straight up front, but there's other costs behind it as time goes on, as you spin up more VMs, which aren't necessarily predictable and easy for you to contain.
And sometimes cloud perhaps isn't in the right place. Your data's somewhere else, and you need to run processing, but your data's elsewhere. Or so having the ability for you to decide that. Also, companies maybe spaces are an issue. Maybe data centers are full up, but hyperconvergence gives you a really small footprint for quite a lot of resource. So it really does start to give enterprises, small businesses, even branch offices, another option that's really elegant. And actually, from branch office to head office to corporate data center, the same solution can be deployed at each, integrated and managed with the same interface.
So how are today's application demands on infrastructure different to what we've seen in the past? If you were just to summarize that for people who are thinking, okay, I can see why, but do I really need to be going this way if I'm going cloud?
I've got my opinions on it, and I know Darren will have his, or I hope Darren will have his. From my perspective, when I'm talking to customers, the demands haven't changed necessarily so much. It's just the requirement to run these applications in a shorter time period, more efficiently and better, have increased. But similarly with that increase or that requirement from the business to have these applications running more efficiently from their perspective, in the background, the code behind it potentially hasn't been improved. These developers are building on top of old code. People have left. Some of that code may be inefficient. I'm talking to customers where it's much more cost effective to actually go ahead and purchase a hyperconverged solution with SSDs giving you great performance, and as I said, lowering that latency between the actual storage and the compute, so it's all very local, and chipsets have come on, and it's much cheaper to purchase that hardware than it is to actually pay the developers the money to get that application to run more efficiently. So that's certainly, from my perspective, the way I see it. I'm sure, as I say, Darren, you have your opinions on it?
Yeah, I think there's sort of a number of levels here. I mean, on one aspect of it, applications, they're all fairly similar. Growth and demand, maybe is in peaks and troughs for different businesses. And then every business goes for a rationalization or a transformation at some point. And this word cloud comes in, this word like local data center comes in. And so when looking at scaling out, scaling up, when looking at rationalizing, when looking at combining, and trying to sort of reorganize your infrastructure, you'll look at cloud as an option. You'll look at internally as an option. And so a lot of people that I deal with look at cloud and think to themselves, well, we need to start thinking about the cloud. And maybe it's not the right answer for them. But because it's such a key word at the moment, because it's such a, and it's such a buzzword, people feel that the cloud is the way to go. And I think in a lot of cases, it absolutely is. But for some people, hosting it internally is just as viable as an option. The other side is really where you've got capability or you don't have capability. And the business will turn around and say, well, okay, we need you to provide us with X amount of storage. We need you to provide X amount of IOPS. We need X amount of compute and resource power. And actually, we need it yesterday. And they turn around to IT and they say, well, we've got to now specify a SAN. To provide that many IOPS is hundreds of thousands of pounds, which is a lot of money. We need this amount. Okay, now we've got to start thinking about compute resource. Now that's data center space. And all of that then will lead the company, the business perhaps, maybe sort of the business systems components within the organisation to say, well, local IT isn't agile enough. We need to then provide this. We need this now. And they'll go externally and they'll buy that service with it externally for themselves. And with the opening of a firewall port, potentially, they can get that within days, maybe hours. And so IT has to be agile enough to kind of meet the demands of the business. And if they're not, the business is going to look elsewhere. With hyperconvergence, that gives you the ability and the agility to meet business demand really quickly internally within your own IT infrastructure. And that means, corporate IT, they keep control. They don't have to relinquish that. You don't have to start extending. Because if the business do go and buy from the cloud without prior planning, without prior thought, then you find that it will start to fall short at some point. And when it falls short, IT are then forced to maybe extend solutions into the cloud. So a cloud strategy is excellent if it's brought through, if things are extended appropriately. But if it's brought by the business to satisfy short-term demand, then it will often fall short. And hyperconvergence can give you that real agility to deploy into the data center really quickly and deliver both capacity, performance, and in short timescales.
Thank you for that. So in terms of trends in integration and adoption of hyperconvergence, what are you seeing, Darren, with clients and how they look to start adopting?
I suppose it varies. I've been a certain customer now, a financial services customer for a number of years. And the driver for hyperconvergence for those guys was basically the onboarding and the tuning of some new staff. An opportunity came up, the company took it, and they found that they needed to move over just under 1,000 seats in short term. Business property had to be purchased, people had to move over, desktops had to be provided, and it coincided with a shift in desktop strategy. So at that time, hyperconvergence was used to satisfy that demand. I think from VDI, hyperconvergence is excellent, and in this particular case, Nutanix has been a real sort of plus, allowing this business within inside a few months to take on board just under 1,000 people, spin them up a desktop, and for that desktop to be performant, to operate in a call center, and allow this business, this financial services business, to transform and take on all these people and deliver a call center successfully in a short amount of time. Where I think hyperconvergence across the board, and Nutanix in particular in this case, has really helped us, is the fact that it's performant. And it does exactly what it says. Storage has always been the biggest issue with VDIs. There's been lots of talk about how many IOPS you need. There's been some really quite conservative figures in the planning. If you read from Citrix and VMware, there's been lots of people that have run sort of battles and bake-offs between various products and how many IOPS you need for certain technologies. But Nutanix delivers hundreds of thousands of IOPS for an 8-node block. I think we were seeing up to say 250,000 IOPS delivered for just under 1,000 desktops, and this is out of probably the fifth or sixth VDI deployment that I've been involved with. This is the first deployment where we just don't, all of the storage troubles, all of the storage limits have been completely removed. And what that's all added up to is that it's been quite easy to deploy, it's been quite easy to manage, and it's been performant and successful. And as a result of being successful, the business appetite for that has grown, and they want to put more people onto it. And this is where VDI, and I feel VDI solutions kind of fail. The initial proof of concept will work well with the limited hardware that's been purchased for a proof of concept or a limited deployment. And then come time to scale, you have to then start scaling out storage. And the storage bill will come in for increasing the SAN, increasing the heads on the SAN, new disk trays and the like, and it starts to become cost prohibitive. Whereas with hyperconvergence and Nutanix, you buy an additional block, you get storage with that. It integrates really easily, within sort of hours, and you've got additional compute and performance and capacity in one sort of installation. So it allows, for me, Hyperconvergence and Nutanix allows you to scale out, and it allows you to scale out that storage and compute linearly, and makes it, again, gives the business back this agility by allowing you to scale quickly.
What would it have looked like if they hadn't gone Hyperconverge, this particular client?
If this particular hadn't gone Hyperconverge, it would have meant, being able to install capacity for resource. So, it would have meant some hosts of some sort, maybe blade servers or rack servers, and storage. So there'd be separate storage that would provide, either block or file storage to those hosts. So what you've got straight away is basically two teams now charged with delivering the one solution. And you could add into networks into that as well. I mean, networks plays a role in absolutely everything in the data centers, obviously. But you've got two teams. You've got two different sort of objectives, two different parts of the business that then have to liaise. And historically, that relationship has obviously been close. Whereas, you've got to plumb all those things in together. So it does give you that added complexity. Whereas with a hyperconverged solution, you've got one box. Once it's installed, everything's local. And I think that's the one thing that a traditional storage system can't give you. And that's the local running, the most optimized storage that you can be running on at any one point. So Hyperconvergence, Nutanix in particular, make sure that the data running on its virtual workloads is local on the host. So the host that's running the virtual machine, the virtual workload, the data for that virtual machine, whatever hypervisor it sits on, runs on that particular host. And invariably it runs on the fastest tier of storage. It runs in SSD. And that could mean that in the Nutanix solution, certainly the solution we have at my current customer, you have over 800 gig of solid state disk, enterprise solid state disk per host running your virtual workload. And when you start looking at things like linked clones, and even full clone servers or full clone virtual desktops, that's all running in solid state disk. And that gives you incredible performance. There's obviously additional tiers of storage where cold data can be moved down, and it can be sort of dropped down to the capacity tier where it's not being called upon. But should it be called upon, it can be then escalated into a large amount of cache. With a remote storage system, you've always got that remote storage. It's always connected by fiber channel or NFS, and you've always got that slight bit of latency between the two. As performant as it is, it can't beat something that's directly attached to the server that's running on.
So fair to say that the development of flash storage has really brought this into reality.
Yeah, absolutely, and not just for VDI. If anything, all the hyperconverged vendors, we've all come around. Nutanix themselves come around because of VDI. We solved a use case there with, as Darren was saying, where traditional VDI infrastructures fell on their asses, mainly because they were running off a spinning disk, so the disks weren't performing quick enough. The network latency between that actual SAN and the actual servers where the VMs are running was causing further issues, and therefore you were providing users with a desktop that wasn't performing similarly or better than their existing physical desktops. And then from ourselves being able to solve these problems and actually demonstrating it on large scales, other IT administrators have come along, the DBAs, the big data guys who are running SAP or Oracle have come along and said, hey, look, this is surely going to help us with our infrastructure, with our performance as well. And we've grown out with those workloads as we've seen people run Exchange on it, other server infrastructures onboard it as well.
Yeah, okay, great. So that's one particular customer that you've just referenced there, Darren. Are you seeing clients across the spectrum moving towards hyperconverged stacks?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, financial services has got its own unique requirements, and hyperconvergence, and certainly other solutions fit with that very well. But I think you've just got to look at the headlines on the Nutanix site to see people from or manufacturers from different industries, government organisations. You can see that lots of different people. Certainly, being involved in Nutanix, the interest that comes through and kind of the history that we have at Xtravirt with delivering Nutanix, we're getting calls and we're having conversations with customers about it from lots of different organisations. So it's certainly not unique to one particular environment. It's not unique to one particular customer or type of business. I think it's something that can absolutely be deployed anywhere from a school to to a branch office of a major enterprise to the headquarters or the data center of that major enterprise, whatever they may be dealing with. In fact, I think there's a number of government agencies that you cite or Nutanix cite as case studies. So yeah, absolutely. I think it's something across the board. It's not certainly not a niche solution.
Okay.
And I'd echo that as well. Being an SE, I'm out and about talking to customers about Nutanix, how it will fit into the workloads that they've got. I've spoken to small customers who are only running, say, 20 or 30 VMs, just running a server infrastructure, currently got it sitting on 4 or 5 2U servers with some NetApp storage attached to it, and it's all coming to the end of life, and they've got to relicense it or purchase new hardware. And then they've looked at us to say, well, can you offer something that's different? We've gone, yeah, we can actually not only provide you the hyperconvergence actually on the virtual side, we're giving you, in some respects, a hyperconvergence on the physical side as we take these 12, 13U of actual physical capacity that you're using, and bring it down into a 2U box, giving you the same performance, well, if not more performance than you've currently got, for a cost that is actually quite enticing to small to medium businesses, and then, as Darren says, even out to the large enterprises, because we are talking to customers about, let me see how we can replace your existing storage, your existing servers. Very much on the performance side of things, from the experience Darren's got. From my side as well, recently I've been talking to a number of customers who want to replace something like Hitachi VSP storage, which gives them great performance, but it's just a real pain for them to manage and expensive for them to manage, because they have to have people who are specifically trained in how to manage and work with that specific piece of storage. And then what happens when they have a major problem, or they actually need to get some analytical data out of that storage? They've got to pay more consulting fees. When Nutanix, we just give you a platform that's easy for you to manage and easy for you to get the performance from it, and easy for you to get analytical data back from it as well.
Okay, and just to give a balanced environment or a balanced discussion, what are the situations where you wouldn't want to go hyperconverged, and what are the downsides that people need to also consider?
I'm not too sure about the first question. Maybe I'll let Grant. But certainly, I think there's a couple of things with hyperconverged that I certainly found in my experience. And the first one is it's kind of it's new, and people turn around and it's the question is, what's that? What crikey! No one ever got sacked for designing a server-sand solution, right? So something that's new in a business, I think people's comfortability. However, people's comfort level with a hyperconverged solution may not be that mature really from day one. Certainly, once you've run it, people are quite happy with it. So the initial conversation can be quite difficult, and people maybe don't trust it. Maybe they think, well, it's not been around enough. We want to see it go through the life cycle. We want to speak to other customers, and generally when they do speak to other customers, they're quite comfortable with that. So that adoption, it can be a bit of a leap of faith for some companies, because it's just not what they're used to. The other side of it is the fact that once it's in deployed, obviously you've then got barriers to adoption. You've got people that are, as Grant said, a company running a particular vendor's storage environment has got a storage team. They've also got maybe an infrastructure team, a core services team, for example, and they've had these silos of workloads where there's SMEs. Now comes along a different player with, that's dramatically simplified the storage infrastructure. So, SAN is obviously a specialized role to get the performance, the resilience, and the fault tolerance within a SAN, requires, certain skills. It requires a certain amount of effort and people there to deliver that. The same from the server side. And now you're delivering a new technology that kind of doesn't fit in one camp or the other. It does complement both of their technologies, but it ultimately could replace or displace those technologies. And that's sometimes, you would see it, some people, some personnel don't manage change well. And something like Hyperconvergent comes along and it just upsets that balance. So people feel that maybe that their job's at threat or that they have to retrain. On the upside, the retraining for something like Hyperconvergence, a lot of skills are transferable. A lot of your standard hypervisor skills, a lot of your standard storage skills equally apply to that solution. And Nutanix is fantastically easy to support. It's obviously 100% software defined, and most of it's run from a command line or a really great Prism interface, which is obviously web based, and it's super easy to learn and to sort of transfer that knowledge into those departments. But some people can put up barriers to that adoption. And the final point is Hyperconvergence. It sort of equals high density as well. One challenge I had in designing a solution with limited data center space was that within the space of 2 racks, with 2 switches at the top of that rack, we could scale that up to sort of many thousands of users. So, this 4 square foot of data center could contain the majority of this particular business's workload. And that's seen as a high risk. So perhaps then thinking just the extra step, well, actually, do we plan and protect for that, separate power phases, smaller racks, smaller densities? How do we make sure that we've got, we don't have all our eggs in one basket? So that's kind of, a challenge. The 2 challenges I've kind of mentioned there, they're nice challenges to have, but it just shows you that how much hyperconversion is rocking and shaking the market. From the people that you're delivering into to just the sheer fact that you have to think about things like, you've got so much in such a small area. How do I protect myself from that?
Thank you. Okay, and just to pick up on one point there, when you mentioned, well, you don't want to have all your eggs in one basket. One thing that I've found in the blogosphere is people talking about vendor lock-in, not just in the hyperconverged part of the stack, but even in the virtualization layer. How does that relate to what you've just talked about in hyperconvergence?
Well, I think there's 2 things there. Nutanix supports almost all hypervisors out in the market now, from KVM to Hyper-V to vSphere, and its own Acropolis hypervisor now that again is going to, I think, shake the marketplace up. So at a software level, you've got the option to choose what you're most comfortable with. At the hardware level, Nutanix provide their own software, but they also have they also license or franchise their software with other vendors such as Dell and IBM, I believe. Grant,
Lenovo. Yeah, so we've got partnerships with Dell and Lenovo. So to echo really what Darren said there, we're agnostic when it comes to the hypervisors. That's Hyper-V, vSphere or ESXi, and our own Acropolis hypervisor, which is a fork of KVM. And we give you now the ability to run each of those hypervisors within a Nutanix cluster. And we've also said, and we've got this out here as well, that in the future we'll also give you the ability to seamlessly migrate a VM between each one of those hypervisors. So you may be running ESXi in your production environment, but you might want to then export one of those VMs into Acropolis for you to then run in your test and dev. So you won't be paying a licensing on Acropolis, which you will do, or you need that warm fuzzy feeling of a vSphere licensing within your production environment, and then we will handle the seamless migration and conversion of that VM onto the other hypervisor. When it comes to the hardware lock-in, well, you can always quite happily say back to people in that respect, you've already got hardware lock-in. It's very rare that you'll go to a customer or work for an organization that is currently running HP Blade servers, and then we'll go off and start buying Dell Blade servers. Very rare that happens. Once you start buying hardware tin from one shop, you buy consistently from that shop. And back to that, we've got our partnerships with Lenovo and Dell to allow you to run our software on their platforms.
And that's a good point. I mean, the company that I'm currently working at has utilised the Nutanix hardware, and certainly they and that's for, specifically, one use case. They have another use case where they've already got a particular manufacturer, and they're running with their hardware. And now those strategic alliances that you've got with those other companies actually could complement those environments. So it actually, I think, then gives you that agility to move from, to deploy hyperconvergence into other areas that maybe, you've already got deployed and developed. So you can maybe then, as a lot of storage optimization tools do, you can actually extend the life of that existing kit and get more out of it, because the software is doing the tuning for you and actually making the best use of the hardware on that environment. And I'll refer back to my earlier point about SSD drives running locally on the hosts rather than using a SAN that's over a connection that has some inherent latency just by its design.
Okay, thanks for that. Speaking of software, perhaps, Grant, you could tell us a little bit about the Microsoft partnership and why an Azure consistent environment is important for the enterprise data center.
Yeah, so we've been working really closely with Microsoft with the Hyper-V running on our platform to allow you to run Azure Stack and Azure Pack in your current data center on the Nutanix platform, and then stretching that environment out onto Azure. So really where we've talked about around all this, is the cloud right for most enterprises, or is an on-premise cloud better, which is what Nutanix is offering? Or with the case of the Azure side of things, is actually allowing you then to run a hybrid cloud instance. So you run your VMs, your infrastructure on your local Nutanix cluster, your on-site, on-premise cloud infrastructure. And then for those times when you need to be elastic and buying more hardware isn't an option, or lead times are too long, or maybe it's going to be a short tenure where you just need to be elastic and grow out just for a short period of time with these VMs, that consistency with Azure then will allow you to burst out onto the Azure platform, spin up those VMs for the period of time that you need them, and then bring them back onto the platform either when you've bought more capacity, when you've removed some of the capacity, maybe you've turned off some dead VMs, and we give you that ability to actually analyze and bring back that information from within Prism, or maybe when you just need to expand out further.
Do you think I might be able to coin a phrase and call that hyperconverged cloud burst?
I've already marketed it. But yeah, no, that is a great phrase of putting it. It's a good way of putting it in that respect. Because as I said, we want you to have a hybrid cloud instance, because some TTOs are so focused, or some IT administrators are so focused on the cloud, and we do know it's right for some instances. So those short tenure periods when they say you just need to expand for a short period of time. One of our reference customers is a fitness, a gym membership, and in the start of the year, that's exactly what they do. They run Nutanix with a Hyper-V on the platform with Azure Pack built into it, and then come the start of the year when we all sign up to go to the gym and they just need to spin up some VMs for that time to expand out their databases, they burst in onto Azure for that very instance. And then through the months later when we all start revoking our gym membership, that's when they come back onto premise, because they don't need all of that extra capacity that they've burst onto.
Interesting. So back over to you then, Darren. For those that are listening to this thinking, right, I do need to start thinking about where this hyperconvergence could fit into my future plan, what sort of questions need to be answered when they start going through that process?
I think it's the same as any technology or any technology refresh or technology plan that you might approach. You've got to understand what your requirements are first, really. Lots of customers we go to kind of don't really know what they need to achieve. I think if you've got an understanding of your current requirements, your current issues that you face, what challenges you're looking to solve, what new features you're looking to provide, what value you're looking to provide to the business with your IT solution, that's kind of the same across the board. I don't think there's anything unique to hyperconvergence, unless you have actually got a really complex environment and you're looking to simplify it. So, just having a really good understanding and having a methodology in there for your project, having the right personnel involved. Obviously, lots of companies, they go out to big system integrators and they've got a great track record in the market, on large transformations, but it really is about the quality of people that you get to deliver that. So making sure you've got the right people defining the questions, asking the questions, designing the solution. I think you just approach hyperconvergence as you would any other major infrastructure project.
Okay, thank you. And anything to add to that, Grant?
No, I think Darren's absolutely right. Don't be afraid of the new. In some respects, I'd say that. Definitely, it's not dissimilar from the old. It's just a better way of doing it. But yeah, always try and plan these big projects out. And certainly as Nutanix, we always go to customers and say, again, as we said at the top of this call, that let's not go in and do a complete rip and replace, because that's just not going to happen. You don't have the manpower to do all of that. You know, you've got existing operational difficulties, and you don't want us to come in and just dump a whole load of hardware on you, and then you spend months migrating all your VMs onto it. The beauty of the scale-out architecture is exactly that. Buy what you need now, migrate those VMs onto it as part of the project plan, see how they perform, and then start scaling out accordingly as you need to bring on those other workloads as they best fit onto it. So yeah, planning with all of these projects is key. And in some respects, definitely seen where customers have failed because they have gone ahead and tried to treat it very much like an existing three-tier architecture. Let's just forklift trucked it in and we'll move on to it when we've got time. No, take your time on these things. Plan it out.
Great, thank you. So as we start to wrap up now, I'm on to my favourite question, and I'll throw this to each of you in turn. So Darren, where do you see the future heading? And what predictions do you have for folks that are thinking about the 3 to 5 year horizon in this area?
Looking to the future, I don't think anyone's got a crystal ball and can look and can predict quite where things are going to go. New technologies are coming out all the time. If you asked me that question 3 to 4 years ago, you might have turned around and not even had hyperconvergence on your mind. I think, business is going to carry on as they are. There's still going to be a demand for on-premise and off-premises IT. There's still going to be a demand for, full-time employees in companies to deliver these solutions. There's still going to be a demand for offshoring, and the whole landscape isn't going to change too greatly. I think the conversion's already started with things like hyperconvergence in those subtle changes in the data center where we've got big unwieldy projects of old, the server SAN infrastructure. That's already started to change now. And just as when virtualization was young, it was kind of an ad hoc or a unique use case for servers to be virtualized. You look in the data center now, and it's virtually 90% virtualized. And the move to desktops has maybe, and the adoption of virtual desktops has maybe been a little bit slower. I would see that hyperconvergence is now making that kind of move into the data center. So I think where you've got a lot of companies now that are maybe 100% traditional, you'll start to see hyperconvergence making that move. Whether there's any additional or new technologies over the horizon waiting to take us by storm, that I suppose is we'll have to wait and see. Time will tell.
You couldn't be any more honest than that. Okay, and now over to you, Grant. What do you see the future bringing? Perhaps even in the next couple of years for the hyperconvergence.
Yeah, so I definitely see hyperconvergence becoming more and more to the forefront. I think that's quite clear when the big players like EMC, Cisco, HPE are bringing out their own hyperconverged platform. So that's definitely going to take more and more and start changing the data center in its own way. When it comes to the jobs or our jobs, I don't see jobs disappearing, but I do see people becoming more and more generalists, being not so focused on the storage or virtualization or even the OS. I think people are going to become more generalized in those environments, which is something we were all talking about. Or IT operational managers a couple of years ago wanted us all to be generalists, but I think now the opportunities are there to become generalists. Sadly, I don't think that's going to apply to the networking guys, because they definitely ring fence what they do and make sure everything runs. But I think as well, when it comes to the networking side, software-defined networking is going to become a bigger play, and then maybe bring networking into that generalist role then as well, because that becomes more of a virtualization play. On the hardware side, I think we're going to see definitely, currently we're already running in a hybrid instances where we're using SSD for the writes and some of the reads, whereas using HDD SATA disks for capacity side of things. I think in the near future you're going to see that change as SSD drives become bigger and therefore cheaper. All flash arrays are going to become more prevalent. And similarly along those lines, I think we'll start seeing NVMe come on board and actually be where the write layer is, so we still have something providing a very high throughput on IOPS, and something else giving us a capacity side of things. So yeah, I think that from my perspective, that answers it, I think, on 3 different levels. Yep, hyperconverged is definitely going to be becoming more and more in the front. People's jobs are going to be changing as they become more generalized. And I think scripting in that respect is going to take on more of a role as well. And finally, the hardware is just going to evolve and become more efficient, shall we say, or quicker.
And just to add on that, I think that you pulled up about the software-defined data center there, or mentioned that. There's been lots of new technologies coming out to assist with the software-defined data center, and a lot of these new products come out in early versions. Lots of new players enter the market, and in the next 3 to 5 years, what we'll see is the settling of that. We'll see that the major players will still be there. Obviously, some of the startups will come and go, but for me, we'll start to see which of these technologies that maybe virtualize the network, which of these assist with the software-defined data center. We'll start to see which ones build on their features, which ones become more feature complete, and who actually starts to kind of win that corner in the market, if you like. And that should then give us a sort of shift into actually whether these solutions are worth adopting, whether they're going to be more viable, whether they're there for the long run, or whether they just are short-term fads that don't really survive the long race.
Very good. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for the honesty, and really enjoyed this chat. So thanks for being part of it, and we'll obviously have your contact details in the show notes. And thank you again. That brings us to the end of another episode of Cloud Insiders. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed it. And to find out more and access show notes and downloads, head over to cloudinsiders.fm. You can track us on Twitter @cloudinsiders, and we'd love you to leave us a review on iTunes. See you next time.